Hello Americans channel. This video is made by free videos from Storyblocks, and these images and video we use just for explanation, and it's free use also.
When Diane first heard about her brother's passing and that he left her several items, she was surprised. They hadn't been in contact for 2 decades now. People said her brother lived a reclusive life. But it wasn't until she stumbled upon a painting among the items that things really took a strange and unexpected turn. Woman inherits cheap painting from brother, then she finds this inside. Initially, Diane had no expectations, but when she stumbled upon the cheap but pretty painting, memories from her childhood came flooding back. The rustic imagery of a church building surrounded by nature had always hung in their living room. And the moment she got a hold of it, Diane was convinced she could restore it. Diane decided to sit down with the painting. With tender strokes, she meticulously brushed away decades of grime. After all this time, filth and dust had been building up on the surface, but underneath the painting still seemed in good condition. The colors were still vibrant and lively, but also revealed something else. As Diane ran her fingers over the painting's surface, she felt some irregularities that were hardly visible to the naked eye, but clearly noticeable to the touch. It felt like something was stitched to the back of the canvas, something that wasn't supposed to be there in the original painting. It piqued her curiosity, making her realize she'd need to remove the canvas from its frame to uncover what was underneath. The frame would be hard to remove without damaging the painting, but Diane had steady hands, and she knew she had to uncover this strange mystery. So it was time to get started. Right after she began the delicate task of freeing the canvas from its frame, a soft rattling sound caught her attention. Something was lightly tapping against the frame's wooden edge. With each careful movement, she grew more curious about what might be concealed behind it. But this object didn't seem to be stitched to the back. Diane was shocked when a key slipped out from behind the canvas and landed on the table. She stared at it, surprised. Instead of picking it up, she carefully turned the canvas over to see what was stitched to the back, hoping that it would reveal more than just the key. Tightly stitched to the back of the canvas was an old piece of parchment paper folded neatly. Its edges had yellowed with age, and its contents remained invisible from this view. Diane realized that removing it would require utmost care to ensure the fragile paper didn't tear or the canvas would be damaged. Setting the canvas aside gently, Diane reached for the key that had unexpectedly fallen out earlier. As she turned it over in her hands, she noticed a small cross delicately engraved on its surface. But there was nothing else on it. The key made Diane wonder even more, what door or box did it open? Diane placed the key down and focused her attention back on the canvas. With steady hands, she began to delicately remove the stitches. She wanted to see what was on it, but was careful not to damage the painting. Each stitch she removed made her more eager to uncover the parchment's secret. As the final stitch came loose, Diane gently extracted the folded parchment. As she began to unfold it, she was taken aback by its size. The paper expanded considerably more than she had anticipated. Holding it out in front of her, she realized this wasn't just a small note, but potentially a detailed document or map. She laid out the large sheet of paper on her workbench to inspect it further, the edges slightly curled from age. The fabric, though old and a bit worn down, was still sturdy in her hands, and the markings on it were clearly visible, as if they had just been made yesterday. The intricate, delicate lines and lettering were well-defined and full of detail, each stroke seemingly purposeful. The markings and their complexity indicated a town map of some sort. The amount of detail on the map was nothing short of incredible, suggesting that whoever made it had an intimate knowledge of the area. The lines and lettering were beautifully crafted, each character and curve appearing with a natural flow, as though the artist had carefully planned out every inch of the map. Diane's eyes lingered on the intricate details of the roads and waterways, all drawn with an impressive amount of precision. It was clear that a true artist, someone with remarkable skill, had created this map, she thought. She noticed street names, rivers, and even the most narrow of creeks being displayed on the paper, all aligned with great accuracy. But one thing in particular stood out: a single building, circled multiple times in red pencil, marked as the focal point. The surrounding woodland areas, so rich in detail, suggested that the town was nestled somewhere in the countryside, far removed from the usual hustle and bustle of city life. The map's depiction of dense forests and winding paths and the town's unique layout made Diane feel certain that it lay somewhere distant from any place she recognized. Diane knew the geography of these parts well, having explored them for many years, so she immediately noticed that the town on the map wasn't from around here. She was confident in that. She held the map into the light and saw ink shining through from the back, so she carefully flipped it over. And on the back of the parchment, the mystery continued to deepen. Diane was met with a long list of written markings that seemed to stretch endlessly down the page. It was mostly faded, the ink worn down by time, and the words were almost impossible to decipher in some places. What remained intact was fragmented and cryptic, and she couldn't understand most of the text, no matter how hard she tried. But there was one thing she could make out, faintly yet clearly, a town named Cedarbrook. Diane stared at it, feeling an odd sense of familiarity as though she had seen it before. Diane found herself staring intently at that one particular word, Cedarbrook, as it lingered in her mind like a faint echo. Cedarbrook, she muttered to herself repeatedly, trying to bring any sort of memory or connection to the surface. She racked her brain, tracing the years, the places she had visited, the people she had met. I know I have heard that name somewhere before, she kept repeating, frustration building as she drew a blank. She could almost feel the memory dancing out of reach, but it stubbornly refused to make itself known. However, Diane wasn't one to give up. She was resilient and wasn't about to let this mystery slip through her fingers. With a deep breath, Diane turned the map over again, determined to solve the mystery. She held the map with both hands, her left index finger tracing the circled building highlighted in red. She could almost sense some hidden significance in that spot, as if something about it was waiting to be discovered. She grabbed the mysterious key with her right hand, examining it closely. The two objects seemed to be linked somehow, and a spark of realization began to form in her mind. Maybe the key opens the door to that building, she thought. Or something inside it might be connected to the puzzle. It seemed like the only possible explanation. Her curiosity and determination led her downstairs, the faint creaks of the old wooden steps echoing through the quiet house. She held onto the handrail tightly as she carefully maneuvered the steep staircase, aware of each step's potential danger. Even though the descent required her full attention, Diane never once let go of the key. She clutched it in her hand like it was precious cargo. The key felt significant, as though it were a vital clue that could unlock the secrets surrounding the map and its mysterious markings. She held it firmly with her free hand, the weight of her purpose and the key itself grounding her resolve. Diane finally reached the bottom of the stairs, her heart racing with anticipation. She carefully placed the key on a rough piece of cotton fabric next to her keyboard, ensuring it was safe and out of harm's way. She stared at the key for a moment, contemplating its meaning and what it could possibly open. The computer screen flickered to life as the machine slowly awoke from its slumber. Diane wasted no time. She entered Cedarbrook into Google, hoping the search would reveal some clue. A list of results appeared, but the information was sparse and lacked detail. She continued scrolling, eyes scanning the page intently when something caught her attention. Though there wasn't a lot of information about Cedarbrook, Diane noticed something strange. It was a small town with a population just over 1,000, and the results were mostly mundane pictures of shops, local landmarks, and a car mechanic's garage. But then her eyes grew wide and her heart skipped a beat. Among the images, she saw a church that was unmistakably familiar, the same church that had been displayed in her painting. Diane leaned in closer, her mind racing with questions. Could this be the same place? Could this town hold the key to the mystery she had been chasing? The connection was undeniable. In her painting, though, the church was all alone out in the woods, isolated from the rest of the world. But in the pictures she found online, there were several buildings present around the church, buildings that didn't appear in her version. Diane studied the screen for a while, her mind racing through the possibilities. It took her a moment, but eventually she connected the dots. This key must be related to that church somehow, she thought. Her curiosity now piqued. She felt the need to learn more, to uncover the mystery of this connection. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was significant. She immediately began searching for the exact location of the church online, her heart racing with excitement. As she skimmed through the information, she realized it was only a 45-minute drive from her workshop. Without hesitation, Diane canceled her appointment for the day and started her car. This was important. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. With the engine roaring to life, Diane drove over to the church, her mind swirling with possibilities. She had a theory now, and she was eager to see if it held any weight. She had to see the church with her own eyes to test it. Diane drove through the small town, her eyes scanning the surroundings, but her focus remained on the church. She could already see it in the distance, its tall spires rising above the rooftops, calling to her. It was a strange moment, finally seeing the building in real life after spending so much time studying images of it. The place felt strangely familiar somehow, as if she'd known it intimately for years. As she approached, her anticipation grew. She parked her car across the street, took a deep breath, and marveled at the church's presence. It was just as majestic as she'd imagined. There weren't many other buildings in sight, and the streets were almost eerily vacant, contributing to the sense of isolation. Diane crossed the empty concrete lane, her footsteps echoing in the quiet air. She made her way toward the church, the large wooden door looming before her. It stood at least twice her height, ancient and imposing. Her hand instinctively went to her pocket where the mysterious key was resting, but she quickly realized it wasn't necessary. With a slight push, the heavy door creaked open effortlessly as if it had been waiting for her all along. She stepped inside, her heart pounding with anticipation. As Diane made her way through the main hall, the vast emptiness of the space struck her. The church benches were abandoned, dusty, and unmoved, with a faint smell of old wood and incense lingering in the air. The altar stood ahead, illuminated by the flickering light of burning candles. The soft glow seemed almost mystical, casting long shadows on the stone floor. Diane's curiosity only deepened as she scanned the surroundings. She called out, her voice echoing in the silence. After a brief moment, a door in the back of the church opened, and a pastor entered, his robe flowing behind him. The pastor introduced himself as the religious leader of the congregation, his voice calm but laced with an air of authority. He asked Diane if she needed any assistance, his kind eyes fixed on her. Diane was taken aback for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Hi, my name is Diane Lombard, and I'm here because I've been researching the history of this church," she began. She was about to continue when she noticed the pastor's reaction. His eyes widened in shock, and his demeanor shifted instantly. It was as if something about her name triggered an intense reaction in him. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, exchanging confused glances, neither sure of what had just occurred. Diane couldn't quite place it, but there was something unsettling in the pastor's response. He seemed to recognize her name, though she couldn't understand why. It didn't make sense. She felt the weight of the moment, the tension hanging in the air. "What's wrong, Pastor?" she asked, a little more impatiently now, hoping for an explanation. However, instead of answering her, the pastor simply turned and said, "Come along." His voice was firm but not unkind, and with that, he began walking away without another word. Diane was left momentarily stunned by the pastor's lack of explanation, but despite the confusion, she decided to follow him without protest. There was something about the way he moved, almost as if he was on a mission, and she couldn't help but feel drawn to it. The robed man led her through the church, his steps steady and purposeful, while Diane's thoughts swirled in uncertainty. She had no idea what was going on, but her instinct told her she had to stay close. The uncertainty only added to the mystery of the situation, and her desire to understand it all grew stronger. As the pastor led Diane into the back room, she was immediately struck by the enormity of the space. The room was vast, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were completely covered with paintings, each one more beautiful than the last. Diane's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight. It felt almost overwhelming, the sheer number of stunning works of art surrounding her. But the pastor's focus was clearly on one painting in particular, one that he seemed eager for Diane to examine. He gestured toward it with a smile, inviting her to come closer. The pastor's smile was warm but enigmatic as he pointed to the largest painting in the room. "This painting is a representation of the founder of this church," he explained in a soft, almost reverent voice. Diane's curiosity deepened, but she didn't quite understand why this was so significant. As she leaned in for a closer look, the pastor motioned to a small nameplate at the bottom of the painting. Diane's eyes quickly shifted to it, and she read the name with growing interest. It was a name she hadn't expected to find. And something about this name felt important, though she couldn't figure out why. Diane edged closer to the small, aged nameplate on the wall and couldn't believe what she saw. This church's founder had the same last name as she did, which was an oddity. Her name was quite unique for this area of the country, and she had never heard of anyone else sharing it, especially in a place like this. Diane had visited many places in search of her roots, but never expected to find anything like this during one of her journeys. Her heart raced as she tried to process what was happening. Was this all just a coincidence, or was something much bigger at play? The old man looked at Diane for a moment, and his eyes widened when he saw the key she was clutching tightly in her fist. His voice was soft but filled with weight as he said, "It finally happened." Diane, confused, turned her gaze to him, trying to make sense of his words. She asked him what he meant, but the pastor only shook his head slightly before speaking again. With a knowing look, he explained that the church founder was, in fact, her ancestor. Diane's heart skipped a beat, and she could feel the blood drain from her face. This was impossible. "How do you know?" Diane asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. The pastor didn't respond with words immediately, but instead pointed at her hand, which was still clutching the old key. Diane looked down at her palm, almost as if she hadn't noticed it before, as if the key had suddenly gained more weight. Diane explained how she had found the key, along with a map of the area, tucked behind an old painting she had come across. The pastor's face changed instantly when he heard this. His expression softened with awe, and he seemed to have a sudden realization. The pastor's voice was steady as he spoke. "If you receive this painting, it means you were meant to have it," he said, his tone almost reverential. He went on to explain that the founder of the church, the person who had established this place, was most likely the creator of the painting that Diane had discovered. The more Diane listened, the more she felt as though the pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed were falling into place. It was no surprise, the pastor said, that such a painting would end up in the hands of the founder's kin. Diane carefully opened her hand and handed the old key back to the pastor, unsure of what was about to happen next. As soon as the key left her hand, the pastor's eyes shifted to the edges of the painting. He moved quickly, grabbing the edges with both hands and pulling it aside. Diane stood frozen, her heart racing as she saw what was hidden behind the painting, a small, heavy-set door. "What is behind it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, tinged with both awe and fear. The pastor didn't answer immediately. He just nodded to himself knowingly, almost as if he had been expecting this moment. The pastor took a deep breath and turned back to Diane, his expression a mix of frustration and longing. "The doorway behind this painting was discovered years ago," he explained slowly. "But no matter what we've tried, we've never been able to open it. Without a key, it seemed impossible to unlock." Diane's eyes widened as she listened. She had heard rumors of secret chambers and hidden doors in ancient buildings, but to witness one firsthand was something completely different. The pastor seemed almost defeated by the mystery, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes now that Diane had brought the key. Diane listened intently as the pastor spoke, but his words faded as she focused on the key she was holding in her palm. It felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of everything they were about to uncover. The pastor's voice brought her back to reality, and he handed her the key once again, asking her to do the honors. Her fingers tightened around the cool metal as she approached the heavy metal keyhole. She slowly inserted the key, heart pounding, and as she twisted it, a click echoed in the silence. "It fits," she shouted excitedly, a wave of triumph washing over her. The mechanism popped, and the door was ready to open. The old door, which had been locked for so long, opened with little resistance, not a single creak to be heard. It was well-oiled, Diane thought, for being as old as it was. Behind the door lay a dark, mysterious space. The two of them peered into the shadows, trying to make out any shapes in the darkness. Then, as the pastor stepped inside, he lit the candle he had brought with him. The flickering light revealed the vastness of the chamber. It looked almost like an underground labyrinth, and the air felt heavy with the promise of secrets long buried. As Diane and the pastor made their way into the darkness, they descended deeper and deeper down the narrow staircase. With each step, Diane felt the air around her grow cooler, thicker and heavier. It felt as though they were moving further from the Earth's surface, heading into a different realm entirely. A strange vibration hung in the air, almost like the walls themselves were alive. Diane addressed the pastor. "How far down do you think we are?" The old man just shrugged, his face unreadable, but Diane could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Neither of them had expected the journey to take them so far. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the bottom of the staircase. The air was so thick with silence that it almost felt suffocating. Diane's voice echoed as they spoke, and their footsteps reverberated off the walls, making the space feel much larger than it appeared. They couldn't see much of anything, but they knew the chamber was vast since it echoed like crazy. The pastor lit a second candle to create more light, and as the flame flickered, it revealed the sprawling space in front of them. "What is this place?" Diana whispered in a low but amazed voice. The room was mostly empty, with nothing more than a cold, hard concrete floor and bare stone walls that seemed to have withstood time and decay. However, one notable feature in the center of the space was a large, weathered wooden chest. It stood out not just because of its size, but also because of its intricate craftsmanship. The chest was beautifully crafted, its surface etched with ornate carvings of figures and symbols. As Diane looked closely, she felt a strange sense of familiarity. These markings mirrored those on the map she had studied for days, connecting her to something larger, something unknown yet strangely intimate. The pastor, an elderly man with a quiet demeanor, turned his attention toward Diane. He could see the curiosity in her eyes and the eagerness with which she studied the chest. Slowly, he began to speak of the rumors whispered throughout the town for years. Many believed that hidden treasure lay buried somewhere within the church's walls. Some said it was wealth beyond imagination, others insisted it was something more sacred. "Your ancestor," the pastor remarked with a knowing look, "was wealthy but also enigmatic. His life, much like this church, is shrouded in mystery. There's no telling what might be locked away in this chest." Diane listened intently, a sense of excitement growing within her. Diane's heart raced as they walked together toward the chest. The pastor had given her the honor of opening it, but Diane wanted to share this moment with him. After all, it was not just her family's legacy at stake, but also a part of the church's history. "Let's do this together," she said, her voice filled with anticipation. The pastor smiled and nodded, agreeing without hesitation. There was something special about this moment that felt personal and sacred. Together, they positioned themselves on either side of the heavy chest. With a few deep, steadying breaths, they lifted the lid, revealing whatever secrets had been hidden for so long. As the heavy lid of the chest fell backward, Diane and the pastor peered inside, their eyes adjusting to the dim light of the basement. To their surprise, the chest was not filled with gold or jewels, but with something far more intriguing. It was a collection of paintings stacked neatly and carefully preserved. Each piece was more breathtaking than the last, showing intricate details and vibrant colors. Diane, who had spent years restoring and studying art, was captivated by their beauty. These were not just ordinary works, they were masterpieces, each more stunning than anything she had ever encountered in her own work. The style of these paintings captivated Diane, and that was reflected on her face. The pastor pointed to one of the paintings and began to explain its significance. "This one," he said, depicts the old mill near the river. It's one of the town's earliest landmarks. Diane leaned in closer, intrigued. Each painting showcased a different location within the town of Cedarbrook, each a historical landmark that had played a role in shaping the community's early days. Some of these landmarks had long since disappeared, while others were still standing, albeit changed over time. "It's mesmerizing," Diane whispered. The more Diane studied the paintings, the more she realized the true depth of the artist's work. It was a tribute to Cedarbrook's history, captured in exquisite detail. Each brushstroke told a story, one that needed to be told instead of locked away in a dusty box. After admiring the paintings for a while, Diane and the pastor carefully removed each one from the chest, making sure to handle them with the utmost care. They leaned the paintings against the walls of the basement, their curiosity growing with every new discovery. However, as they moved the last painting aside, something caught Diane's eye. A small, brown leather journal was tucked at the bottom of the chest, partially hidden beneath the paintings. It was handmade, its edges worn, and the cover embossed with the golden emblem of the church. Diane picked it up gently, feeling a sense of reverence as she held the journal in her hands. This was something important, something personal. Diane and the pastor sat on the cold stone floor with the journal. They opened it carefully, the pages crinkling as they did. The handwriting inside was neat and meticulous, with dated entries that spanned many years. It became clear that this journal belonged to the church's founder, the same individual responsible for the paintings in the chest. The entries detailed his thoughts, struggles, and hopes for the future of Cedarbrook. In one entry, the founder described how the paintings were created as a form of memoir, a way to preserve the essence of the town and its original spirit. Diane felt a deep connection to the past as she read the words. As Diane and the pastor read on, they came across an entry that spoke directly to them. In his wisdom, the founder had written that whoever discovered the chest and its contents would be worthy of inheriting the church's most precious possessions. However, he emphasized that these valuable paintings were not to be sold or hoarded. They were meant to be shared with the world and displayed for all to appreciate. Diane and the pastor exchanged glances, both understanding the founder's wishes. The paintings were not just relics, they were gifts meant to inspire and honor the community. Together, they decided that organizing an exhibition would be the best course of action. The news of the discovery spread quickly throughout Cedarbrook and beyond. People from all corners of the town and visitors from distant places began to gather in anticipation of the exhibition. The paintings, expertly preserved and still as vibrant as the day they were created, would finally be seen by the public. Diane didn't need to restore a single one. Their beauty remained untarnished over time. The exhibition opened to great fanfare, drawing massive crowds. The town's long-forgotten history was now on display, and people marveled at the intricate details of each piece. The exhibit became a cultural landmark, rekindling interest in Cedarbrook's past and traditions. Within just a few months of opening, the gallery had become a major attraction, with thousands of visitors streaming in to see the paintings. The local media covered the event extensively, and the exhibition even gained national attention, with news outlets showcasing the discovery and its significance for the town of Cedarbrook. However, the exhibition's effect on the community was most remarkable. The paintings, which once lay hidden in a forgotten chest, now symbolize the town's history and pride. The exhibition honored Cedarbrook's past and united its people, renewing their sense of belonging and shared identity as they looked toward the future with a renewed sense of purpose. Over the following year, the exhibition continued to draw a steady stream of visitors. Diane and the pastor frequently welcomed people into the church, guiding them through the stories behind each painting. It was a fulfilling experience, one that allowed Diane to share her ancestors' legacy with the world. The church felt alive once again. Diane soon became a local celebrity. Her name was mentioned in every newspaper article, her connection to the church's history piquing curiosity. While she appreciated the attention, Diane remained humble, focusing on the preservation of the church and its treasures. She felt a deep sense of responsibility for her ancestors' legacy. Cedarbrook itself experienced a renaissance. The influx of visitors to the exhibition brought new life to the town. Local businesses flourished, with tourists seeking out souvenirs, food, and lodging. For the first time in decades, Cedar Brook felt vibrant, and many residents, young and old, began to feel a renewed sense of pride in their hometown. Diane's bond with the pastor deepened as they worked together to maintain the church. They developed a close partnership, united by their shared commitment to preserving the town's history. Diane helped curate special events, including tours of the church and lectures on its founder's legacy. The pastor, too, became more involved in community outreach. The church became a symbol of Cedarbrook's past and future. As the exhibition gained national attention, it inspired other towns to explore their own histories and hidden treasures. Diane received invitations to speak at other historical societies, sharing her experience of uncovering the past. She marveled at the power of history to bring people together. The journal Diane had discovered in the chest became a key part of the exhibition. The entries, filled with details of her ancestors' life, gave visitors a personal glimpse into the man behind the paintings. Scholars and historians began to visit Cedar Brook to study the journal, which further cemented the town's reputation as a historical treasure trove. Despite the newfound attention, Diane never lost sight of her original goal: to honor her ancestors' work and preserve the town's spirit. She worked tirelessly, collaborating with local historians to compile a comprehensive history of Cedar Brook. She wanted to ensure that future generations would continue to appreciate the town's heritage and the legacy of her ancestor. The pastor's health, however, began to decline. As the months passed, Diane took on more responsibilities at the church. She became the official caretaker of the paintings, ensuring their upkeep and preservation. The pastor, though frail, continued to offer guidance. Diane knew she had inherited not only the legacy, but also the responsibility of the church. Cedarbrook began to attract more than just tourists. Artists, inspired by the church's history and the stunning paintings, moved into town. The local art scene began to thrive. Diane became a mentor to many of these new artists, offering them a space in the church to display their work. The town had truly transformed into a creative hub. 1 year after the discovery, the church held a grand anniversary celebration. The townspeople gathered to commemorate the year of the exhibition's success. Diane stood in front of the church, overwhelmed with gratitude for everything that had transpired. It was clear that the church, the paintings, and the town of Cedar Brook had forever changed her life.